The market was crowded at rush hour, with vendors clamoring and hawking their wares, shoppers haggling and scurrying back and forth between stalls. And in the backyard, a young skinny boy was unloading a truck with vegetables alone. He was tired and sweaty, pulling heavy crates, but he didn't give up and finished on time as promised. John, the owner of the tent, came out to accept the work, counted everything, inspected, was satisfied, and, a little spit the guy out of a thick wad of bills, said, "Well done, Ethan, well done, here you go. Now come back in a week, I'll bring more. There will be work." I look at you and wonder, you're not a bad guy, you're a hard worker, you don't drink, but why don't you get married? You're still wandering around town, looking for something. Ethan sighed heavily, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Aha, as if you'll get married here. No one has a house. Who needs me like this? There's only one woman, but she turns her nose up at me. I'm unlucky, Uncle John. I guess it's my destiny to wander the world. They said goodbye, and the boy went to his hovel, a small abandoned house on the outskirts of the city. It should have been torn down long ago, but the local authorities had no time for it. So Ethan had taken a liking to it. The condition of the dwelling, of course, was bad. Wooden ceilings are just about to collapse on your head. Through the gaps in the old wooden windows, whistling wind, water and amenities were not, but still better than sleeping on the street or with homeless people on the heating main. For 3 years the guy had already settled down here. He had some kitchen utensils, a basin, buckets, and an old, worn-out Ethan. For water, however, had to go far away, a couple of kilometers, to the column. But difficulties did not frighten the owner of the house for a long time. He was used to them since childhood. At home, Ethan counted the money again and was satisfied with it. He had enough for a week's food. Ethan fetched water from the well, washed, changed his clothes, and immediately went to the flower store. He bought a modest bunch of daisies. Then he stood like a sentry outside the clothing store and waited patiently. 2 hours passed, and finally she came out, his queen, goddess, and favorite woman. Ethan froze, afraid to even move. How beautiful she was in a tight pantsuit with a ponytail and an elegant purse over her shoulder. He timidly handed her a bouquet and babbled, "Hello, Natalie. This is for you. You are so beautiful today I cannot admire. If you knew how crazy I am about you. My heart sinks when I see you." The woman looked arrogantly at the scanty beau in a laundered t-shirt and snorted, "Take your broom. What do you mean you've got a fiancé? Get out of here, you're nothing. I need a decent guy with an apartment and a car, not a bum. Do you understand?" Ethan took offense and muttered, "Why are you so rude? I'm from the heart, with all my heart for you. And you?" Natalie just waved his hand irritably and went away, tapping her heels on the pavement. And he was finally upset and wandered away. The faithful dog Batten was slowly walking beside him. He was always by his master's side, both in sorrow and in joy. Ethan sat down on a bench in the park, took a harmonica out of his pocket, and began to play sad music. The dog immediately stood on his hind legs and howled pitifully in unison with the melody. It was so touching and funny to watch. A crowd of gawkers soon gathered around Ethan. Many left him some change and small bills and clapped. After an hour, the guy had a decent amount in his pocket. He was tired of playing. His lips were sore, but he felt a little better, as if some of the sadness had gone away with the melody. Already in the shack, having had a snack and fed the faithful dog, they lay down on the sofa, and each began to think about his own. Batten licked his master's hands, yawned, and looked faithfully into his eyes. And Ethan remembered his miserable, crippled childhood. Ethan didn't have a normal childhood at all. His mother had abandoned him in the hospital, and for as long as the boy could remember, he had grown up in an orphanage. And there, as usual, was not sugar, and beaten and insulted, no light. He hated this place with all his soul, and all dreamed of escaping to be free, to travel, and live freely. It seemed to him that there, outside the gates of the orphanage, boiling real beautiful life, as in the movies. And here he was languishing, enduring slaps and slaps. It was so offensive. The boy prepared his escape carefully, stuffed an old rucksack with breadcrumbs and some supplies from the canteen, stole a penknife, rope, and a small towel from one of the pupils, and that same night quietly escaped through a long-made loophole in the fence of the playground. He was 14 at the time. He didn't have any documents or money on him, But did that matter to the maximalist teenager? He imagined how he would hitchhike, sleep outdoors, bake potatoes. It seemed so exciting and romantic. But when he found himself in the conditions of real harsh city life, he almost disappeared. Everything turned out to be not as rosy as Ethan had imagined. No one was willing to give a ride to a snotty boy without money and documents. I wanted to eat endlessly, and my stomach was cramping, and I had to spend the night somewhere. And at night it was scary, cold, and so dreary. He was even joined the company of the yard gang, broke the glass in the store with a stone, and he almost went to jail. Ethan then suffered a fear, running away with all his legs from the police officer, who chased on his heels and promised to pull out his legs. The guy barely got away from the chase and decided for himself that such a path is not for him. Otherwise, instead of a shelter, he would end up in the colony, and there is obviously not better. Since then, Ethan wandered like a stranger, sleeping wherever he could. But about 3 years ago, he was lucky, if I may say so. He accidentally stumbled upon this dump and settled in. And that's how he settled in. The guy never begged. Mostly he worked at the market. The peddlers knew him well and welcomed him. And sometimes, when he was in the mood, he could play the harmonica with Batten in the park. People willingly gave him money, and so he lived. He dressed in second-hand clothes at the flea market, even bought bed linen there, old, but whole. Often the guy was so sad and hopeless from the realization that no one needs him in this world. Even if it will not be him, no one will cry. It made him so sick. He wanted the comfort of home and loving people around him, at least some kind of family. He often went to the market and saw how mothers bought their children new clothes. They were happy, or on the contrary, capricious, and he was so sad and envious. If only someone in this world would love him and take care of him. And recently Ethan had fallen in love with Natalie, who worked as a clerk in a clothing store, knew her own price, and did not even look in his direction. And he kept dreaming about her. For him, she was an unattainable star. The boy even dressed decent, began to take care of himself, cut his hair and shave on time. And he spent the lion's share of his modest earnings on bouquets, desperately trying to somehow attract Natalie's attention. Although he realized he had no chance because he was a bum, a vagrant, and she was a well-to-do woman from a decent family. They didn't have anything in common, but you can't order your heart, can you? A couple of weeks passed. The money ran out long ago, and John had not yet brought new goods, and the days were hard. Ethan and his shaggy friend were wandering through the park, both of them with hunger in their stomachs. Suddenly the guy saw a strange picture. A young pregnant woman in a powered wheelchair was walking down the alley, and next to her was a stately adult man and another one who looked like a guard. It was like a convoy in a prison, and the woman looked very pale and distressed, but she was expensively dressed. Ethan felt so sorry for her, a pregnant woman, but in a wheelchair. It's a rare thing to see. So he decided to cheer up the stranger a little. He took his favorite harmonica out of his pocket and began to play a cheerful tune. Batten immediately danced on his hind legs, circling around his master, barking and wagging his tail. The woman stopped, involuntarily looked at the stray, and clapped her hands. She obviously liked the performance. But the stern man frowned and shouted sharply, "Hey you! Stop this street buffoonery, you pea-brained buffoon! Get out of here and take your dog with you!" Ethan became so offended. Again he was being chased away. He called Batten and started to walk away. But suddenly a woman's voice called out to him. He turned around. A woman was hurrying towards him in a stroller, holding 2 hot bilyashas with meat, which she had just bought from a vendor in a stall. They were wrapped in a piece of paper. The woman timidly held them out to him and said, "Good afternoon. You play so wonderfully, and the dog is wonderful. Trained. Here, take this. Have a snack. I really liked it." She pointed her finger to the class and began to turn around, because behind them men with disgruntled faces were already hurrying. Ethan gave her a friendly smile and thanked her. "Thank you too, beautiful stranger. Batten and I are very grateful for the treat. Have a nice day." So they said goodbye. Ethan sat down on the bench and shared the treat with the dog. 1 pie he ate himself, and the second he gave to his best friend. They were both so hungry that they sipped the hot pie instantly. It seemed incredibly delicious. The guy was about to crumple up the paper and throw it away, but then he noticed a whole letter on the back. He immediately smoothed it out and curiously began to read the message from this sad stranger. "Help me, please. I am being held by force. I am Ali, wife of the late rich hotelier, Max. Recently my husband and I were in a terrible accident. I think it was staged and they were trying to kill us. My husband was killed on the spot and I survived with only a broken spine. It was a miracle I didn't lose the baby. But when I woke up in the hospital, my husband's companion, Henry, has been stalking me ever since. He moved me into his mansion. That's where he keeps me. All movement is under escort, and there are guards outside my room. He says he wants to keep me safe, but he took away my cell phone. I don't know how I can get out of there. Help me. Tell all this to the police so they can take action. I'm counting on you." Ethan felt a little uneasy. So it wasn't just an imagination, and the woman was really in trouble, and these two were her escorts. And she had probably prepared the note in advance, hoping that she would be able to pass it on to some passerby in the park by some miracle. The boy was thinking out loud. "What shall we do, Batosha? Should we go to the police? What do you think? I feel sorry for this woman. She's pregnant, disabled, and in trouble. What should we do? Shall we help her out?" The dog looked at him seriously, as if he understood something, and barked 3 times as if approving his master's intentions. Ethan used to trust the dog, decided, and went to the nearest police station. But of course no one would listen to him there. But they just laughed. "Look, man, why are you fooling us here? What makes you think that? You said yourself, no one touched her. She was not beaten. Maybe her husband got fed up with her, and she decided to make an unfortunate joke. And in general, women are not predictable people, and pregnant women even more so. Look at this pile of cases. There's a murder, a robbery, and a gang of crooks stealing from citizens. What are you suggesting, that I drop it all and do your obscure story? You'd better go home, don't interfere with our work. This is not the 90s to intimidate people with such methods. Most likely this is some kind of family dispute or a misunderstanding." Ethan waved his hand. He realized that from the outside everything he said looked implausible and ridiculous, even stupid. On the porch he was suddenly caught up by a young trainee, Ron, who asked him to tell him everything again, and he reread the note, took it with him and promised, "I'll get to the bottom of this, I promise. We have to double-check everything. Thanks for letting me know." But immediately the trainee's cell phone rang. Someone gave him an assignment, and he rushed off to do it. Ethan immediately realized that if the policeman would take up the case, it would not be today or tomorrow. All night the guy tossed and turned, did not sleep. The stranger did not go out of his head, and by morning he realized that he would try to save her himself, because he had nothing to lose. For his worthless life anyway, no one will not give a penny. But at least he could help a good man. Toward evening he and the dog went to the address given by the girl. There was indeed a luxurious mansion with 2 balconies and a huge high gate. The guy told the dog to be silent. He understood everything and kept quiet. Ethan climbed a tree to get a better look at what was going on inside. In the yard, a huge alibi roamed untethered, the sight of which gave him goosebumps. Finally, in one of the windows on the first floor, he saw Allie's silhouette, looking sadly out the window, gazing into the distance. Ethan thought, "At least now we know where her room is. It remains to be seen how many people are guarding it." Toward night, the owner, the important gentleman, left the mansion, and the guard closed himself in his cabin, apparently going to sleep. Clearly the wheelchair-bound prisoner wasn't going anywhere. A plan began to form in Ethan's mind. He was not used to getting out of messes. He climbed down from the tree and began to scour the fence walls, and from the backside of the house he found a small gap, piled his body on it, peeled off a couple more boards, figured that even with Ali he should be able to get through. Then he thought of a way to distract the huge, angry dog. He didn't want to feel its fangs on him. He quietly called Batten over to him, whispered something to him, and he listened intently, his ears raised. The dog, though a yard dog, was very smart. Ethan exhaled, crossed himself, and clapped his hands loudly, giving the dog a command. The dog immediately ran around the mansion from the other side and began to dig the ground and bark loudly. The huge alibi in the yard immediately ran there. That's just what Ethan needed. He dashed to the window and knocked quietly, praying that Allie would hear him. Lucky for him, she pulled up in her wheelchair. When she saw the vagrant, she was happy, pulled herself up on her arms and opened the window. Ethan whispered, "I came to rescue you. The wheelchair won't fit through here, but I'll climb over and get you out. We don't have much time. I hope everything works out." Apparently, the universe was on their side that day. Ethan pulled Allie out with great difficulty, picked her up in his arms, and went as fast as he could to the opening in the fence. His heart was racing, sweat was pouring down his eyes, and he didn't even realize he was near the shack. He put Allie on the couch and only then realized that his faithful Batten was not there. He had to go back and look for his missing shaggy friend. At this point, Allie was babbling, "Thank you so much. I never thought I'd get out of there. You're so thin, but you're so strong. I'm sorry about the dog, but I don't want Sherkan to tear it up. He's rabid." At this thought, Ethan felt sick, and he covered Allie with an old blanket and said, "I'm sorry. I have to go back. I won't forgive myself if the dog dies because of me. He is my most faithful friend, do you understand? I'll be quick, 1 foot here, 1 foot there. You lie down and rest for a while. They won't be looking for you here." Allie nodded her head. Her mind was a mess. She was grateful to this tramp for saving her, but she had to think what to do next and how to expose the villains, without hurting the baby and herself. Several hours passed. Allie wanted to go to the toilet and was very cold, but without a stroller she was helpless and her stomach prevented her from sliding down. And the woman was also worried about where Ethan had disappeared to, and the dog had not returned either. That's right, both of them were in trouble. Are they alive at all? And all because of her. She had to help herself and them somehow. But what could Ali do? She could only cry out for help and shout for help, hoping someone on the street would hear her. The poor girl was hoarse and her throat was dry when finally a homeless man like Ethan came in. It was his friend Dave who was walking by and heard the screams. He was stunned to find a pregnant, infirm woman in his friend's shack and stood there blinking. Allie began to wail, "Please help me, call the police, we can't wait, Ethan and Batten are in danger. Give me some water, please, or I'll die of thirst." Dave finally came to his senses and found a 100-year-old push-button in his pocket and called the police. He had to explain for a long time that he was not drunk and not a drug addict on drugs. They did not believe him at once, and no wonder. A homeless man calls and says that there is a pregnant woman with disabilities in the shack, and his friend must have been killed. Anyone would suspect a hoax. But when the patrolman arrived at the address, everything turned out to be true, and exhausted Eli was taken to the department, and on the way to the hospital she became quite bad after all this. They took all her statements and went to the mansion, to check the situation and to look for Ethan there. That's where he went to look for the dog. The operative group turned over everything in the house and on the territory, and found a stray under an acacia bush. He was unconscious and with a punctured head. He was immediately taken to the intensive care unit. The dog was also at death, lying on his side and wheezing. He was bitten by the same alibi. The poor guy was also taken away for treatment. But the most important question was, where did the owner of the house go? In his office they found a bloodstain on the floor. Experts took fingerprints. It was still not clear what had happened here, but one thing was clear: there was no crime. The investigator had a serious job ahead of him. The investigation began. It turned out that the blood did not belong to Ethan, and most likely the owner of the house. But where is he? The investigator suggested that maybe Ethan killed the owner in the heat of battle, and hid the body. Then he was looking at a lot of time. But how did he end up under a bush in the yard? When the investigator voiced all this to the widow, she began to wave her hands and indignant. "You are wrong. It cannot be. Ethan is not a murderer. What's going on? He saved me, just like that, out of the goodness of his heart, out of the dictates of his heart, even though he saw me once in his life and then 5 minutes. And you're telling me that a man like that could be a murderer? I don't believe that." Ethan's friend Dave also stood up for him. "I've known Ethan for many years. We've been through fire and brimstone. We've been through a lot of things, but I'll tell you one thing. He's a kind man and could never kill, even if he was defending himself. So do good deeds after that, and you'll get another case. Ethan's dying, and you're digging for him." The investigator thought over everything, analyzed, reread the case of a vagrant from the shelter. Yeah, he's got a hell of a background. He ran away at the age of 14 and is still wandering around without documents, a ghost. True, the director of the orphanage also characterized him as a sympathetic boy who was insulted by everyone, driven to hysterics, so he probably decided to run away. But the policeman knew many examples, when even the quietest people in the heat of the struggle could kill. Here the reaction in a state of affect is unpredictable. Who knows if Ethan could have killed Henry or not? Allie was very worried about Ethan. Every day asked the doctors about his condition. While it was critical, the guy was put into an induced coma, hoping that the young body will still cope. The woman prayed for him day and night. That's all she could do. Most of all, she wanted this simple guy to survive, and blamed herself that he suffered because of her. The widow asked the medics for the phone, dialed the manager of the hotels, and he brought her things from home, a card, and everything she needed. She paid for the dog's treatment at the veterinary hospital and asked that Batten be held in a holding facility until his owner recovered. She was told that the dog is still weak, refuses to eat, and misses his owner very much. Eli's condition had deteriorated due to her worries, and the doctors were afraid that she would have to have a cesarean much earlier, given that she would not be able to give birth on her own due to spinal problems. One thing was good. Her late husband had been very rich and frugal, and the widow had plenty of money. Allie longed for him, for with his death her whole happy life had collapsed, and now her baby would never see his father. The woman closed her eyes and cried, remembering how much Max loved her, and she didn't realize her happiness. She also wanted to get well, to get back on her feet and look into Henry's eyes. After all, her husband considered him his brother-in-law. He trusted him with all his affairs and invited him to visit. He paid for his kindness. After her husband's death, this scoundrel, it turns out, decided to take over the entire business of her husband and behaved like a master. Thanks to the faithful manager, he all delayed, transferred the money to another account, in general, trying to wait for Ali to get back on her feet. I mean, she and her husband run the hotels alone. That's why Henry pressed Ali so hard, insinuating that she should think of herself and her child and agree to marry him, or she would only make things worse for herself. But how can one force love when there is another in one's heart, and it groans and weeps with grief? But the widow herself as a person did not interest Henry at all. It was just that he was already asleep and saw himself as sole master, and he saw no other way out than to marry Ali. And when she was completely in his power, he could get rid of her. At this very time the young trainee Ron was released. He learned from his colleagues what had happened, and began to show unprecedented zeal in this investigation, because in fact, it was his first serious case. He couldn't let it go. He had promised to help. He went to the hospital and talked to Ali, looking into her deep blue eyes full of grief, and felt sorry for the poor widow, for her fate had been ruined. So young and beautiful, and already in a wheelchair, lost her husband. How will she, even with such a disease, to raise a child? She wouldn't even be able to take care of him. Ron dismissed the possibility that Ethan had been involved in Henry's murder. For some reason he'd believed the vagrant back at the station. There was no way such a man could be a murderer. Ron decided that he would dig his nose into the ground and get to the truth in this difficult case. He looked through the records of all the cameras in the yard and in the house, and there were a lot of them, worked off fingerprints, interviewed neighbors, and found out a lot of interesting things. It turned out that the owner of the house faked his own death. The video showed how he cut his hand and stained the floor with blood, and then more footage of his guard beating poor Ethan to a pulp, so the vagrant was definitely not involved in his disappearance. And the neighbor heard the screams. But where and why did Henry himself disappear to? And why was he holding his partner's pregnant, sick widow by force in his mansion? Ron reasoned that he needed to look into the accident and the business of the deceased, and then maybe there would be a link. He spent a month digging and digging, going to the deceased's company several times, methodically questioning the staff, starting with the cleaning lady and ending with the director, sometimes asking questions on abstract topics. Piece by piece, everything began to form into a unified picture, and it was disappointing. It turned out that Henry was Max's childhood friend, but only the latter grew up in a rich family and bathed in luxury, and Henry was from a poor, dysfunctional family and all his life was jealous of his best friend. He tried to outdo him in his work, but he couldn't do anything with his mind. And when Ron married the beautiful Ali, Henry went completely off the rails. Colleagues said that he looked at the owner's wife so much that it was clear without saying a word that he had a crush on her. The car was re-examined, and it turned out that the brake hoses had been deliberately cut, and a gold cufflink was found under the floor mat. Ron and the investigator rushed back to the mansion like bloodhounds and turned the place upside down, but they found the shirt without one cufflink. The second one was an exact copy of the one found in the car. There was no doubt it was his partner and friend who killed him. Apparently, he had no intention of Ali being in the same car, but something went wrong, and he was responsible for her disability. That's why he kept her locked up, not knowing what to do with her. On the one hand, he loved this woman, but on the other hand, he realized that she was pregnant by another man, and if he let her go, Ali would surely initiate an investigation to find out who was responsible for the accident. He couldn't let that happen. When Henry realized that the prisoner had disappeared, he decided to go into hiding, realizing that sooner or later he would be found, and the tramp had just been caught in the act, so he'd been beaten up. Ron hurried to tell the widow all this, and visited her again in the hospital. For some reason he was drawn to the sad woman like a magnet, wanting to help her sincerely. But he did not think about the consequences of the conversation. He was too young, inexperienced, and hot. He eagerly told her how he unraveled it all. He thought she would be pleased, but the woman suddenly turned pale as a sheet and clutched her head. God, this is unbelievable. Did Henry do this to her? I can't get it all out of my head. He was forcing me to marry him, forcing me under escort, pressuring me to marry him, so he's the murderer of my Max. And I was under the same roof with him, and he lied to my eyes that he was sorry too. He's the one who made me an invalid. He kept asking me how I ended up in the car. I guess it wasn't part of his plan. And I really didn't intend to go with my husband. He was going on a business trip for 3 days. But at the last moment, he offered to drop me off at the mall. It was on the way anyway. I remember Max's horror when he hit the brake at speed and he was gone. We held hands until the last moment, until we lost consciousness from the impact. I hate that bastard who ruined my husband's and my life. Ali suddenly clutched her stomach and moaned, "Oh, oh, 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 it hurts so bad, please call a doctor." A frightened Ron rushed to the post nurse and there was a commotion. Ali's water broke. She was premature, a month early. The intern was pacing back and forth in the hallway, cursing himself with the last words he could think of. I'm an idiot. She went into labor from worry. Why did I tell her everything? Who needed this truth now? What if something happens to her and the baby? What if she doesn't survive at all? What then? 2 hours later, a tired woman surgeon came out of the operating room and said, "Barely saved. The baby is very weak. Half an hour of resuscitation. Now in the cuvée. The woman in labor is doing well, if I may say so. In 6 months, you can do surgery on her spine. I don't recommend it sooner. Go home. You can't see her. Visiting hours are on the sign in the lobby." Ron had just left the hospital when his cell phone rang, informing him that the tramp had regained consciousness and had been moved to a regular room. Ron rushed over to him, wanting to find out firsthand what was really going on. They said hello and introduced themselves to each other. The first thing Ethan asked was, "How's Ali doing? I left her in my shack and ran after Batten. To save your friend? And my dog? Tell me, did he survive? That alibi was beating him so badly and I couldn't get up. I didn't have the strength to save my friend." The trainee told him everything. Eli gave birth to a baby girl today, not without surgery, but everything seems to be fine. And your Batten is alive and almost healthy, but he's very homesick. He won't eat. He's waiting for you. What a dog's devotion. Do people know how to love like that? Ethan was almost crying. Tears glistened in his eyes. My poor dog. Do you know how much I miss him? He served me faithfully for so many years. He is so smart, and I let him down. When I get out of the hospital, I'm going to get him right back. Ron got to the point. Tell me what happened. And where did the owner of the house go? Because you were suspected of his murder. Ethan crossed himself. I didn't kill anyone. Here's a cross for you. I was when Ali brought home, for the dog came back. I could not leave him. I got there just in time. He was just being attacked by this huge alibi. He was 3 times bigger than Batten. My poor dog braved as much as he could, growled, tried to fight back, but the forces were not equal. He was protecting me. If he hadn't distracted the owner's dog, I wouldn't have been able to get Ali out at all. We would have been torn to pieces. So I grabbed a stick and started swinging it, shouting and chasing the dog away. Then the guard ran out of his cabin, saw me and Batten. He started hitting me. And then he realized that the window was open and Eli was gone. He immediately started calling the owner. And then I don't remember. I lost consciousness. He hit me on the head with something heavy, only the stars in my eyes shone. I woke up a while ago. I don't understand how much time has passed. A day? Or more? The trainee smiled. 3 weeks. You were in a coma. The doctors didn't even give you a chance, but a miracle happened. So consider today your second birthday. Lucky you. Ethan suddenly became sad and sighed heavily. Who knows if it was lucky or not? Luck is not for me. Maybe it would be better not to wake up. I live like a tumbleweed. Nobody's needed me for ages. Except Batten. Henry felt sorry for the poor fellow, a good man, but he'd never had a normal life. He suddenly suggested, if you want, I can help you get your papers, starting with your passport, so you can get a decent job. And when you have a job, you can rent a place to live. And your life will get better, little by little. Ethan was very happy, shook hands with the trainee. Thank you very much. You have no idea how grateful I will be to you. When can I see Batten and Ali? Will they let me see her? They agreed in a couple of days to check on the young mother, let a little recover. They went to see the dog the next day. Ethan was still staggering, weak, but he imagined meeting Batten, and that gave him strength. They'd been released from the hospital for a couple hours, and that was on Ron's responsibility. The men approached the enclosure quietly. A gaunt, skeletal-looking dog with faded, lifeless eyes lay curled up on a bed in the corner. The bowl of food and water was untouched. But as soon as he smelled his master's scent and saw him, he sprang from his seat, wagged his tail, and ran toward Ethan. Ron couldn't believe it, but the dog had tears in his eyes like a human. He licked his owner's nose and cheeks, whimpered, and was happy to see him, hugging him tightly with his paws. Batten threw Ethan on the floor, and he sobbed loudly, stroking the dog, and could not contain his emotions from the long-awaited meeting with his best friend. Even Ron wept. It was so touching. Animals are much more loyal and vulnerable than we humans. Ethan whispered to the dog. Well, what are you, my friend? You've gotten so thin. You need to eat. Come and eat. I'm sorry I didn't beat you back. I was too lazy. Well, the doctors fixed us up. We'll live on in this world. The dog seemed to understand his master and immediately began to eat the food in both cheeks. The employee of the animal shelter even splashed his hands. Wow. So many days of hunger. Not a crumb in his mouth did not put in his mouth, howling and all, as if for a dead man. He longed a lot. Nice dog, smart and loyal, you are lucky to have him. Well, are you going to take him now? Ethan already knew the answer. Yes, now. Well, how can I leave again? He'll think I'm leaving him again. He was astonished. Ethan, you still have to go to the hospital. The doctor hasn't discharged you. You have to go back to the hospital. The dog will stay here for a while. The guy just waved his hand. Enough. I've had enough of the hospital. Baton and I are fine at home. If you need me, you can always find me in the shack where Ali was found. Tomorrow we'll go with Batten to the maternity hospital. I'd really like to see her. Ali had just fed her baby when Ethan came into her room. The guy was very embarrassed, shy, handed her apples and oranges. Hello, how are you? Here, these are for you, vitamins. Congratulations on the birth of your baby. I'm glad it went well. I'm sorry I left you in the shack. I thought I'd go there and back just to pick up the dog, but it turned out like this. I can imagine how much you've suffered in your position. Ali smiled and replied, Thank you for checking up on me, but I'm sorry. I got you in a lot of trouble. At first the investigator thought you'd killed him, but thanks to Ron, the trainee, it was all cleared up. The charges against you were dropped. Ethan, get my purse. It's on the nightstand. Here, take the keys. The guy was dumbfounded and looked at Ali incomprehensibly. What is it? Why? The woman answered, Ethan, you saved my daughters and my life, and I won't let you wander around anymore. These are the keys to the guest house. You'll live there now. And I'll give you a job. I need a gardener and a driver. Ron will help you with your papers and your license. And I'll give Batten plenty of room to run around in the yard. You are a good, kind, and sympathetic guy, Ethan, and deserve a better life. And don't you dare refuse or I'll be offended. The guy almost sobbed from happiness. He could not believe what he heard. God, Ali, thank you so much. You don't even realize what you're doing for me right now. I'm like a stray dog. I've never had a home. It's been a pipe dream of mine. I'd love to take you up on your offer, and I'll do my best. I can't believe my life is changing like this. The same day Ethan and Batten moved to the guest house of Ali, it was so warm and cozy. There was a small room and a kitchenette. What else is needed for life? In the closet, the boy found clean underwear and a towel. Ethan took a hot shower with such pleasure, because earlier he could not afford such luxury. A bucket of water and soap, that was the whole bath. Then he had a snack of sandwiches and tea in the kitchen. He bathed the dog, soaping him thoroughly and saying, "We're white men now, my friend. We can't be dirty, so be patient. There's nothing to dirty the master's carpets." Baton didn't mind at all, barking and splashing merrily. It would seem that such simple everyday moments, which other people in ordinary life do not notice at all, for Ethan was a real delight. The guy decided to give Ali a nice surprise to meet her from the maternity hospital. He ran to John at the market, unloaded 2 cars of vegetables, went through those that were left, and cleaned his stall to a shine. The owner praised the hard-working guy and paid him generously. Ethan immediately bought balloons, ordered a cab, dressed himself decently, and prepared dinner, having bought groceries. He wanted to thank this kind and pleasant woman with such a complicated and broken fate. On the day of discharge, he was already at the emergency room at 8 in the morning, settled everything, said that he would pick up Ali. The woman was so happy. She was very worried. She was helpless. She had a child in her arms. What to do? She didn't want to ask the manager or someone from the company. It was inconvenient. There would be unnecessary questions, condolences, conversations. It's not the time to be troubled. But the nurse surprised her. "Gather up, they've already come for you. A young man, a husband, probably. Look out the window, you'll see for yourself. Don't worry, I'll help you carry the baby." Ely drove her wheelchair to the window and looked out. She even clapped her hands with joy. There was Ethan standing in the middle of the hospital courtyard with balloons and flowers. He was so dressed up, in a new shirt and pants. He saw Ali and started waving to her and shouting, "Congratulations on your daughter." Ethan picked up Ali properly, very carefully carried her to the cab, and held her daughter in his arms all the way, and in the mansion helped to settle in. But the maid Linda was also fussing around her mistress. And when she saw the table set, she was even more surprised and asked, "Ethan, did you cook it yourself? I didn't think you knew how to cook. Surprised me. Thank you for your concern. It's my pleasure." The guy was embarrassed and replied, "Thank you. You would know how much I enjoy a normal life, how nice it is to sleep in a warm, cozy house, not in a dirty shack with mice. I promise that I will help you in everything as a friend, and as an employee, I won't let you down. This is my chance to be a normal person like everyone else. You know, I've been in love with a girl for a long time. Her name is Natalie. But when I was a tramp, she wouldn't even look at me, she snorted. But maybe now I'll get lucky, and I'll get her love." Ali laughed and wished him success on the love front. The doorbell rang, and the maid went to open it. Ron stood on the doorstep with a bouquet of flowers and a huge bag of baby supplies. He coughed and asked, "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to see you, Ali. I wanted to congratulate you. I went to the maternity hospital, but I didn't have time. I was delayed on a mission. That's the way it is. So I want to wish you that your baby grows up healthy, strong, and smart. And you, Ali, that you get well." The girl was so pleased she invited the guest to the table. "Thank you, Ron. I didn't expect it, to be honest. Have a seat and let's celebrate the birth of my Wendy together." They looked at each other, and Ethan realized that he was not needed here now, so he hurried to leave them alone. "Oh, I forgot. I need to feed Batten, and in general I have things to do." Ron suddenly remembered something and slapped himself on the forehead. "Ethan, wait. Tomorrow you can get the documents at the passport office. Everything is ready. So you are no longer a bum, no longer a ghost, but a citizen." The guy jumped, shook Ron's hand, and thanked him. "Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. My dream has come true. I found a place to live. I have a passport now, and Ali promised to help me with a job. Maybe something good will come out of me. What do you think?" Ali frowned. "Don't say that. You're a good guy, it's just bad luck. But things are going to change now, you'll see. Your life is starting to turn around. I'll call an instructor I know and you'll go to a driving school to study to get your license. Then I'll take you on as my chauffeur. After that unfortunate accident, I can't drive anymore. And without a car, I'm like without hands. I need to get back on my feet soon, or I feel my husband's business like the Titanic will go down." Ethan received a passport, successfully passed the license, and began to work as a chauffeur for Allie. She insisted that he went to study, because without knowledge and profession tight in life will have to. Ali paid his wages faithfully, did not offend, and Ethan also worked as a gardener and at John. He began to buy quality youth clothes, to look well and well-groomed. Now it was impossible to recognize the former vagrant in him. And soon the guy decided to go to that very store, to his Natalie. He now did not stand like a dog at the threshold, and went straight inside, asked where to find the girl. But he was immediately shocked. "You're looking for Natalie? She doesn't work here anymore. Family problems, she's been taking a lot of time off. And in general, people like her do not belong in a decent store." Ethan did not understand anything, but asked the store employee to give him Natalie's address and rushed to her house. The woman opened the door to him and was surprised when she saw him. "Ethan, is that you? I never would have recognized you. You look good. What are you doing here? To drive another wedge? I don't have time for you right now, sorry. I was making fun of you and now I'm going to jail myself." And she roared again more than before. Ethan resolutely went inside and said, "What are you so prickly? Tell me what happened." Natalie had nothing to lose, and she told him that the girls had set her up and decided to survive because of her unbearable character. That's why there was a huge shortage on her shift. But she's sure that everything was there, but she couldn't prove it. So they threw her out, and the owner threatened her with jail if she didn't pay back the missing money. At the end, the woman added, "I only pretended to be rich to spite you, but in fact my mother and I live modestly, you see. And where can I get such money?" Ethan told her, "Don't cry. I have a smart investigator, a friend, Ron. He will definitely help you. Recently saved me from jail. Such a case unraveled. I won't leave you in the lurch. I love you no matter how much I love you. Even though you're a meanie." Natalie suddenly grabbed his arm. "I'm a fool, not a meanie. I only measured everything by money, dreaming of finding a richer groom. I did. And what? Where is he now? As soon as he found out about my problems, he vanished. I was chasing you away all the time, and now you've come to lend me a helping hand. Thank you, Ethan. Help me if you can. I'm so scared I don't want to go to jail because I'm not guilty of anything." Ethan knew where to find Ron, of course. In the evening he would come to Ali. Now he cared about her so much, it was obvious that he was in love with her. The boy entered Ali's mansion and caught a hilarious picture. Ron was holding Wendy in his arms and talking to her, stroking her cheeks and looking at her with such tenderness. Ethan felt embarrassed and coughed softly, stomping his feet. Ron waved at him. "Hi, come on in. Are you here to see Ali?" "She's dozing off. She didn't sleep well last night, and I'm just entertaining Wendy. Isn't she wonderful?" Nose to the button, lips bowed. "I love children so much." Ethan didn't know how to start the conversation. "No, I came to see you. I need your help again, as an investigator. I have no one else to turn to. There's a woman in trouble, and I love her very much. Why don't you help me out? You're really good at solving crimes." Ron, like a bloodhound, immediately perked up his ears. "Come on, tell me about it. I love complicated cases and I'll try to help. This is practice. I need it now." Ethan told her about Natalie's problems, begged her to solve them, and promised to help. Then they had a heart-to-heart talk, as the men had become very friendly lately. Ron opened up. "You know, I think I'm in love with both girls at once. I don't know what to do." Ethan made round eyes. "How so in both? It doesn't happen like that." "What, you have two fiancés?" Ron laughed. "Yes. One of them is lying on my arms, sniffling, making eyes at me. I love her madly. I did not even think I was capable of such a thing. And the other one is Ali. I fell in love with her at first sight. Back in the hospital, I was drawn to her like a magnet. I believe she'll get back on her feet. I'm secretly collecting money for her surgery. I dream of marrying her. And even if I don't care if she's in a wheelchair. I don't need anyone besides Ali, do you understand?" Ethan nodded. "Of course, as no one else, I myself have been pining for a girl for a long time without her, and the world is not nice. So why don't you tell Ali everything? That you love her? Maybe she'll be happy." Ron hesitated. "I don't dare. Her husband is dead. She probably still loves him, remembers him often, cries sometimes. And I, like you, I think she sees me only as a friend." The men were having this conversation, and didn't realize that Natalie had been sitting in the stroller outside the door for a long time and could hear everything. She woke up and Wendy wasn't there. She was very frightened, so she got into the stroller and went to look for her. But when she saw Ron cradling her through the doorway, she felt a twinge inside, and tears came to her eyes. And then Ethan came in, and she stayed outside the door again. It was awkward to go out and interrupt their heartfelt conversation. The woman listened to Ron's sincere revelations and quietly cried. Her soul was a hurricane of emotions. She mentally addressed to her late husband, "Max, dear, I always loved only you. You know it. I gave birth to your daughter Wendy, but you are no longer with us. It's very painful and scary to live alone, crippled, and even with a baby in his arms. If it wasn't for Ron's support, Ethan's support, I wouldn't have survived, I swear. Max, I really like Ron. He's so kind and caring, and Wendy adores him. I don't know what to do. I feel like if I'm with him, I'll betray you. And if I push him away, I'll betray myself. I'm totally confused." That same night, Ali had an amazing dream. Usually after her husband's death, she slept nervously, intermittently. She had nightmares. But this one was so vivid, colors like in the movies. In the bright green meadow, Max stood in front of her just as before, cheerful and smiling, and looked at her tenderly. Ali cried, reaching out to him, trying to hug him, but he kept slipping away from her. The woman whispered to him, "Max, darling, come back. I beg you, let me hold you for a second." And he suddenly answered her quietly, "There are no returns from here, my love. I really want you and my daughter to be happy. Don't resist fate, please. I will see that you are doing well and rejoice." And Max disappeared into the fog, everything faded, and Ali woke up in a cold sweat. Her nightgown was wet with sweat, her heart was jumping out of her chest. She remembered every detail of the dream, down to the smallest detail, and realized Max had blessed her. She knew that for sure now. From that day on, the lives of all the heroes changed drastically. Ali had spinal surgery 6 months later. Ron, as a faithful knight, was by her side. Ethan also supported her as much as he could. After a long rehabilitation, she was finally back on her feet. She could now walk with little Wendy, who was already trying to take her first steps. Ron had finally confessed his love to her, and Ali had said yes. The couple, a year after Max's death, had decided to consummate their relationship. Henry was found, he was caught in a fraud, decided to illegally take away another company. Now the villain was waiting for severe punishment for all his crimes. When Ali learned that Henry was in jail, she begged Ron to give her a date. She had wanted to tell the bastard everything for so long. Henry acted confident and even cocky. As usual, Ali asked him head-on, "Why did you kill Max? You two had been friends since you were kids. He brought you into the company, trusted you. Why did you make me an invalid? And then keep me locked up? Why did you do it, Henry? Why?" He suddenly snapped and shouted, "Because, Ali, all the good things in life were for your Max. Rich parents, just for him, company, please get it on a platter, a beautiful woman, here you go. What's in it for me? A Dyson butter? Friends, you say? I hated him, I was jealous of him. And you had nothing to do with it. I didn't plan to kill you, you jumped into the car by yourself. And then you were too curious. You didn't realize your happiness. You were always pining for your husband. If you'd married me, everything would have been fine. I would have become a director. But no, that damned bum ruined everything." Ali shouted in his face, "You're a scumbag, Henry. I hate you. I'm going to only make sure you get the full penalty. I hope I never see you again. I hope you burn in hell." It was not easy in prison, and he tried to kill himself several times, so fate was punishing him for everything he had done. Ethan studied at a correspondence school, worked, and his life got better. Ron, as promised, helped Natalie. She had really been set up by her own colleagues, decided to teach her a lesson for her arrogance and arrogance. They stole money from the cash register and blamed it on her. But when Ron threatened them for perjury, the women immediately got scared and told the truth. The owner apologized to the girl, took back his statement, and asked her to return to the store. But Natalie herself did not want to work in the same staff again. Ethan was now dating Natalie. She finally appreciated his kindness, responsiveness, and saw how he sincerely loved her. They often came to Ali's house, had tea together. Natalie loved to take care of the baby and secretly dreamed of having children herself. One day Ali suggested to her, "Natalie, do you want to work as a nanny? I trust you. I know you'll never hurt my little girl. I'll pay you well, don't worry. It's time for me to get back in the business. Max's money isn't infinite, I need to keep him going. But Wendy's still a baby. I'd hate to send her to daycare, but I'd feel safe with her. Natalie was happy to accept the offer and was now in business too. The two couples became friends as if they had known each other for 100 years. They decided to have the wedding on the same day to make it more fun and not as expensive as two weddings. Everyone was beautiful and dressed up. Ron proudly led his Ali on his arm and looked at his Thumbelina with adoration. She was still small and puny even after the birth. Ethan was bursting with happiness. He had been waiting for Natalie's attention for so long, dreaming of love, and today everything was coming true. They were getting married and would be together forever. Everyone congratulated the young couple and wished them family happiness. On the porch sat the faithful dog Baron. He was now well fed, his fur was shiny, and on his neck an expensive leather collar. The shaggy friend, just as before, idolized his master and served him faithfully. In the midst of the fun, Ethan came on stage and took the microphone in his hands. I want to address my closest people, Ali, Ron, you. A year ago, I was a homeless loser, an orphan, a runaway from an orphanage with no papers. I was a nobody, and I had no hope that anything would change in my worthless life. But when I met you guys, my whole life turned upside down. I'm grateful to you, and I'm ready to take a bow for it. I'm like everyone else now, and I can't be happy about it. I have the woman I love, my fiancée and now wife, Natalie. And I am the happiest man on earth today. So let's raise our glasses to the fact that our strong friendship over the years will not end, that we will support each other in difficult times. I appreciate you guys and love you. All the guests clapped, many even wept, and began to shout to the young, bitter. They didn't have to repeat it twice, and the hall was filled with the atmosphere of love that was literally in the air.